You are hungry. Not the kind of hungry where you open the fridge, stare at it for 30 seconds and close it again. The kind of hungry where your body has been working since before dawn. And there is nothing guaranteed at the end of it. No delivery app. No corner store. No pantry. Just the land in front of you and everything you know about it. That is where your story begins. That is where your food story begins. And it looks almost nothing like what you put on your plate today. For roughly 300,000 years your ancestors ate. Without agriculture. Without livestock. Preserved. Processed. Or packaged food of any kind. They ate what the land offered season by season, region by region. And they became extraordinarily good at knowing exactly what that was. The question is not simply what they ate. The question is how they thought about, how they found it, how they prepared it, and what it tells you about the body you are living in right now. So let us go back. Let us reconstruct not today. You wake up before the sun is fully up. Your body is already scanning. Not consciously. Automatically. The smell of the air, the sounds from outside the shelter, the quality of the light. Your ancestors were not. They were constantly reading it. The way you might check your phone for messages, except the messages were edible. The first thing most hunter-gatherer communities consumed in the morning was not a meal. It was water. Ethnographer and anthropologist James Sussman. Hawaiian people of southern Africa. One of the oldest continuous hunter-gatherer cultures on Earth. Documented that early morning was primarily a time for hydration and orientation, not heavy eating. Your body after a night of metabolic work needed water first. That pattern is ancient. Your morning thirst is not modern. It is 300,000 years old. What came after depended almost entirely on where you were and what season it was. But there are patterns, and the patterns are fascinating. Plant foods made up the majority of calories in most hunter-gatherer diets, particularly in tropical and subtropical regions. Anthropologist and primatologist Richard Wrangham, whose landmark research into human evolution and fire has reshaped how scientists understand our diet, has argued that cooking plant foods, specifically roots and tubers, was central to the expansion of the human brain itself, not me. Your ancestors were digging up the ground and roasting what they found long before they were reliably hunting large game. The tubers your ancestors ate were not the bland potatoes you might be imagining. Wild tubers are dense, fibrous, starchy, and often bitter raw. Species like Venus subterranea, the bombard groundnut, and various wild yams and corns were staples across African, Asian, and later American hunter-gatherer populations. They required knowledge to find. The plants above ground might look like a weed, but your ancestors knew because someone had taught them, bought them, and someone before that. 3 inches below that specifically formation with something worth eating. This knowledge was not written down. It lived in people. It was spoken knowledge. Demonstrated knowledge, experiential knowledge passed across generations, the way you might learn to drive or cook a family recipe. The average hunter-gatherer adult could identify hundreds of edible plant species in their home territory. Hundreds. I smell by season, by location. That is a cognitive library that most people living today could not come close to matching. Fruits and berries were eaten opportunistically and with real urgency. If you ate, you did not save it for later in any meaningful quantity because it would not keep. Richard Lee, whose foundational 1968 study of the dope juice last Hawaiian people of the Kalahari is one of the most. What are the most cited pieces of work in anthropological history? Found that plant foods, and particularly the mangano, accounted for the majority of caloric intake in that population. The mangongo nut, what is exceptionally nutritious, dense in protein and fat, and available year-round in dried form on the ground. Your ancestors in that region were not struggling. They had a food source that was, in Lee's own words, so abundant it was almost impossible to exhaust. But that abundance was specific, it was local, it was seasonal. and it required walking. Richard Lee calculated that the Jew/Hoya averaged roughly 12 mi of walking per day during foraging. 12 miles. Not as exercise, as the mechanism of finding food. Your body was designed for this. The arch of your foot, the length of your stride, the way your hips swing when you walk long distances. All of this was shaped by millions of years of animals that had to travel to eat. Now let us talk about meat. Because meat is where the story gets complicated and where modern assumptions most often go wrong. Your ancestors did eat meat, there is no question. Archaeological sites from across Africa, Europe, and Asia, including sites at Pinnacle Point on the South African coast dated to around 164,000 years ago, show clear evidence of animal consumption. Cut marks on bones, marrow extraction, systematic butchery. But the frequency, the method, and the type of meat were dramatically different from what most people picture. Large game hunting was not a daily activity. It was a high-effort, high-risk, often unsuccessful event. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who has studied the Archi people of Paraguay for decades, found that Archi hunters return empty-handed on roughly 40% of their hunting days. 40%. Your ancestors were skilled, but they were hunting wild animals with spears, and their own endurance in terrain with no fences or traps. Failure was common. When the hunt did succeed, the response was immediate. Get in total. Nothing was wasted. The organs were eaten first, often at the kill site itself, because they are the most nutritionally dense and the most perishable. The liver rich in vitamin A and iron. The kidneys, the brain, these were not scraps. These were the prize. Muscle meat came after. Bones were cracked for marrow. That was rendered and saved. Your ancestors understood the nutritional logic of an animal's body in ways that most modern humans have completely lost. Between large game hunts, smaller animals fill the gap. Rodent, lizard, tortoises, birds and their eggs, insects, larvae. This is one of the parts of ancestral eating that modern humans find most surprising. But it should not be surprising at all. Insects are extraordinarily protein-dense. 100 g of dried grasshopper contains more protein than the same weight of chicken. The disgust response many modern people feel toward insect eating is a cultural artifact, not a biological one. In over 100 countries today, insects are still eating regularly. For your ancestors, they were a reliable, accessible and highly nutritious food source that required almost no effort to collect. Honey deserves its own mention. Your ancestors were obsessed with honey. Cave paintings at sites in Spain and Africa show humans collecting honey from wild bee nests. Some of these images dating back more than 8,000 years. Karel van Schaik, primatologist at the University of Zurich who has studied great ape and human foraging behavior in depth, has documented the extraordinary lengths to which both great apes and traditional human foragers will go to access honey, climbing trees, enduring stinks, smoking hives. Honey was the most calorie-dense carbohydrate your ancestors could find in nature. And your brain's response to sweetness is the evolutionary echo of that ancient reward. Your love of sweet things is not a weakness. It is a very old signal from a time when sweetness was rare, precious, and the pain of getting it. Seafood and riverine foods played an enormous role in coastal and riverside populations. The Blob's cave site in South Africa, excavated extensively by archaeologists Christopher Henshaw and his team, contains shellfish remains dating back 100,000 years. Oysters, mussels, and fish were not just supplementary foods. In coastal regions, they were staples. They were reliable. Shellfish do not run away. The protein and omega-3 fatty acids in marine foods have been directly connected by some researchers to the expansion of the human brain. The idea that your ancestors were plains hunters eating mostly red meat. In many regions and for many populations simply not supported by the evidence. Now here is the counterintuitive part that reframes everything. The diversity of what your ancestors ate, it was the point. It was not incidental. It was the strategy. Modern diets, particularly in industrialized countries, are built on a narrow base of staple crops and animal products. Corn, rice, soy, a handful of domesticated animals. Researchers at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations have estimated that 3 crops, rice and maize, 50% of humanity's plant-based calories. Your ancestors, by contrast, consumed hundreds of different plant species across a year. Each one brought a different combination of nutrients, phytochemicals, and compounds that your gut microbiome evolved over millions of years to expect. The anthropologist Polly Wiesner, who has studied the Jewish Hawaiian for over 40 years, has documented not just what they ate but how they ate. Meals were rarely eaten alone. Sharing was not a gesture of generosity. It was an obligation. The social architecture of food distribution in hunter-gatherer societies was so strong that hoarding was considered one of the most serious social violations possible. You ate together. You shared the kill, brought back what you found, and you put it in front of everyone. The act of eating was inseparable from the act of belonging. Your ancestors did not count calories. They did not read nutrition labels. They did not follow diets. They followed seasons. They followed their bodies. They followed the knowledge of everyone who had come before them. They ate a lot of it when they did, and they moved on. And the result? Skeletal evidence from pre-agricultural human populations reviewed by paleopathologist Clark Spencer Larson. Ohio State University shows on average better bone density, lower rates of dental decay, pure signs of nutritional deficiency, and greater physical stature compared to the first farmers who replaced them. The people who gave up the hunter-gatherer diet to grow wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent showed, within a few generations, shorter stature, worse teeth, and higher rates of infectious disease. Agriculture fed more people, but it did not necessarily feed them better. You are hungry. The land is in front of you. Everything you know about it lives not in a book, not on a screen, but in your body, in your memory. And the people standing beside you who have been learning the same territory since before your grandparents were born. You reach down and pull a root from the earth. You have known this plant since you were small. Someone showed it to you and told you its name. You brush the soil off and take a bite. It is bitter and dense. That is where your food story begins. And some part of it, in the signals your body still sends you when you eat something real, has never ended.